You're not going to believe what happened at the coffee shop today. Liza Montgomery was still shaking when she called her best friend Harper 3 hours after what she was already mentally calling the flying MacBook incident. Her hands still tingled with adrenaline, and she could swear she still felt the cold weight of the top-of-the-line laptop between her fingers at the exact moment she hurled it onto the Italian marble floor of Cafe Artisan. Liza, you're talking like a machine gun. Breathe and tell me properly, Harper said from the other end of the line, clearly concerned. Liza threw herself onto the worn couch of her tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, still wearing her wrinkled cafe uniform, a white blouse that now had a suspicious espresso stain right at chest level, and a black skirt that she swore had shrunk in the wash. Or maybe it was the stress from the past 6 months working to pay for her journalism degree at NYU. Harper, I broke a customer's laptop today. You broke it? Liza, that's definitely grounds for firing. No, I threw it on the floor. On purpose, in front of everyone. The silence on the other end was so profound that Liza checked to see if the call had dropped. Harper? I need to sit down. You, the most polite person I know who apologizes when someone bumps into you, threw a customer's laptop on the floor. Liza closed her eyes and the entire scene came back in high definition. It had started like any normal Tuesday at Cafe Artisan, the kind of place where a cappuccino cost more than her weekly allowance and where she had to smile even when customers treated her like furniture. She'd been at that job for 6 months, saving every penny so she wouldn't have to take out more student loans. And then he showed up. Daniel Blackwood Sterling. Yes, with a hyphen and everything. 32 years old, CEO of the tech startup that was revolutionizing the premium delivery market. His words, not hers. And owner of the most inflated ego she'd ever encountered. Dark hair, always perfectly tousled on purpose. Suits that cost more than her annual rent. And that air of superiority that seemed like a toxic aura around him. Daniel had been frequenting the cafe for 3 weeks, always at the same corner table, always ordering a macchiato with organic oat milk, 2 pumps of Madagascar vanilla syrup, extra firm foam, exact temperature of 149 degrees Fahrenheit, as if he were reciting a NASA recipe, and always complaining about something. He was there with that angel investors meeting, Liza continued, making air quotes even though her friend couldn't see her. You know how he gets when he wants to impress, right? Actually, Harper had never seen Daniel in person, but she'd heard Liza vent about him so many times that she felt like she knew him, and didn't like what she heard one bit. Today, he was particularly insufferable. He complained that the coffee was 1 degree above the ideal temperature, that the table was slightly unstable, when I myself tested it and it was perfectly stable, and that the noise from the espresso machine was interfering with his entrepreneurial genius concentration. He actually said entrepreneurial genius concentration. I swear to God. But that was just the warm-up. Liza got up and started pacing around the apartment, nervous energy still running through her veins like electricity. She stopped in front of the entrance mirror and made a face at her own reflection, brown hair escaping from her bun, green eyes still blazing with indignation and an expression that oscillated between disbelief and self-pride. Then he asked me to bring more napkins to the table. Didn't ask, actually. He snapped his fingers, Harper, and said, "Girl, I need napkins. And while you're at it, bring more sugar, too. The raw sugar, not that processed stuff you usually serve." He called you girl? Wait, it's not over yet. When I came back with the napkins and sugar, he was explaining to the investors how the quality of service in establishments like this reflects the mediocre mentality of the American working class. Word for word, Harper. I heard every single word. Harper let out a curse that would have made a sailor blush. And then, Liza continued, feeling the heat rising up her neck, just remembering, one of the investors said something about how, at least the waitress is pretty cute, right? And you know what that monster replied? Liza, I already want to break something and I wasn't even there. He laughed, that condescending little laugh of his, and said, "Oh yeah. Poor thing is probably here temporarily, right? Probably dropped out of college or something like that. That's what these people do. They don't have the discipline or ambition to finish anything in life." The apartment fell silent, except for the traffic noise below and Liza's heavy breathing. Harper? I'm calculating how long it would take me to get to that cafe and shove his head into an espresso machine. No need. I already took care of it. And she really had taken care of it. Because at that moment, hearing a complete stranger assume she was a failure without ambition, something inside Liza simply exploded. Like a pressure cooker that had been on the stove too long. She remembered walking to the table. Her feet seemed to float over the marble floor. She remembered Daniel looking up from his laptop with that expression of irritation at being interrupted. She remembered him opening his mouth to probably say something like, "What do you want now?" But before he could say anything, Liza had grabbed his MacBook Pro, that shiny silver laptop he caressed like it was a pet, and raised it above her head. "You know what I said to him?" Liza asked, a smile beginning to form on her lips. "What?" "I said, 'Hi, Daniel. I'm Liza Montgomery, journalism student at NYU, weekend intern at the Village Voice, volunteer at 3 nonprofits, fluent in 4 languages, and author of 2 published articles on social inequality. This poor thing without ambition would like to inform you that you are officially the biggest jerk I've ever met in my life.' You did not say that. I did, and then I threw his laptop on the floor. The sound had been spectacular. The kind of sound that makes an entire cafe stop breathing for a full 5 seconds. The MacBook had crashed onto the marble with a satisfying crack, the screen shattering into 1,000 pieces like a silver spider web. Daniel had been so shocked that his mouth literally opened and closed 3 times without producing any sound, like a fish out of water in an Armani suit. "And you know what the best part was?" Liza asked, now smiling openly. "There's more?" The entire cafe applauded. Everyone, Harper, even Giuseppe, the owner who never smiles at anyone, was clapping discreetly behind the counter. "And Daniel, what did he do?" Liza paused, remembering the expression on Daniel's face. For a moment, just a very brief moment, he hadn't looked like an arrogant CEO. He had looked surprised, genuinely surprised, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny bit impressed. But that had lasted about 2 seconds. "He yelled that he was going to sue me, that he was going to make me pay for the laptop, that he was going to make sure I never got a job anywhere in New York City again," Liza said. Then he got up, gathered the pieces of the notebook, and stormed out stomping like a child having a tantrum. "And you got fired?" "Oh yes, immediately." Giuseppe said he had no choice, that he couldn't have employees throwing customers' property around, even if the customer was a monumental idiot. His words. "Liza, and now, how are you going to pay for college?" And there was the $1,000,000 question. Liza let herself fall back onto the couch, all the adrenaline finally giving way to the harsh reality of the situation. She had just lost her job, would probably have to pay for an expensive laptop, and had no idea how she was going to survive the next month. "Honestly, Harper, I don't know. But you know what?" "What?" Liza looked at her hands, the same hands that 3 hours earlier had held a MacBook Pro above her head like a war trophy. "I don't regret it one bit. The look on his face when the laptop crashed on the floor, that's priceless." And it was true. For the first time in 6 months, Liza felt like herself again. Not like an invisible waitress or a student desperate for money, but like Liza Montgomery, the girl who didn't bow down to anyone, especially not to expensive suit-wearing jerks who thought money gave them the right to humiliate other people. "Well," Harper said, and Liza could hear the smile in her friend's voice. "At least you'll have an incredible story to tell your grandchildren. If I manage to survive that long." "You will, Liza. You always do." After she hung up, Liza sat in the silence of her apartment watching the orange sunset through the tiny window. Tomorrow she would have to start looking for a new job. Tomorrow she would have to deal with the consequences of throwing a $2,000 laptop onto a marble floor. But today she had defended her dignity, and that, for some reason, made everything seem worthwhile. What Liza didn't know was that across town, Daniel Blackwood Sterling was sitting in his minimalist office, looking at the remains of his laptop and smiling. Actually smiling. For the first time in a very, very long time. Liza Montgomery had exactly $37 in her checking account, a stack of unpaid bills that could double as a small tower, and the sinking realization that throwing expensive electronics might not have been her brightest career move. It was Thursday morning, 48 hours post-laptop destruction, and reality was hitting harder than a triple espresso shot. She was hunched over her ancient laptop, which, ironically, looked like it might not survive much longer itself, scrolling through job listings when her phone rang. Unknown number. Probably a debt collector, she thought grimly. Hello? Is this Elizabeth Montgomery? The voice was crisp, professional, distinctly not Harper's usual morning chaos. It's Liza, and yes, that's me. Who's calling? This is Miranda Chen from Blackwood Sterling Enterprises. Mr. Blackwood Sterling would like to schedule a meeting with you today at 2 p.m. Are you available? Liza's blood turned to ice water. I'm sorry. What now? A meeting, Miss Montgomery. Mr. Blackwood Sterling is quite insistent. Our offices are located at... Wait. Liza stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Daniel Blackwood Sterling wants to meet with me? The same Daniel whose laptop Why would he want to meet with me? There was a pause. I believe that would be best discussed in person, Miss Montgomery. Shall I put you down for 2 p.m.? Is he going to have me arrested because I should probably mention I can't afford a lawyer right now? Another pause, this one longer. Miss Montgomery, I assure you this is a business meeting. Nothing more, nothing less. Will 2 p.m. work for you? Liza looked around her tiny apartment, at the stack of bills, at the empty refrigerator, at her reflection in the black TV screen showing a girl who looked like she'd been living on anxiety and instant ramen for weeks. Fine, yes, 2 p.m. Excellent. The address is... But Liza was already grabbing a pen, her journalist instincts kicking in despite her terror. Whatever Daniel Blackwood Sterling wanted, she was going to be prepared. At exactly 1:47 p.m., Liza stood in front of the gleaming glass tower that housed Blackwood Sterling Enterprises, feeling like David approaching Goliath's corporate headquarters. She'd changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on her one good blazer, borrowed from Harper, over dark jeans and flats that had seen better decades. The lobby was intimidatingly modern, all white marble, steel accents, and abstract art that probably cost more than her education. She approached the reception desk where a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine smiled at her with perfect veneered teeth. Liza Montgomery to see Daniel Blackwood Sterling. Of course, Miss Montgomery. 42nd floor. Miranda will meet you at the elevator. The elevator ride felt eternal. Liza watched the numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, each floor taking her higher into what felt like enemy territory. When the doors opened, a petite Asian woman in an immaculate navy suit extended her hand. Miss Montgomery? I'm Miranda Chen, Mr. Blackwood Sterling's assistant. Please follow me. They walked down a hallway lined with awards, magazine covers featuring Daniel's face, and photographs of him with various important people. Liza tried not to feel intimidated and failed spectacularly. He's waiting for you in the conference room, Miranda said, stopping at a door made entirely of frosted glass. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? A time machine? Liza muttered, then louder. Water would be great, thanks. Miranda smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Liza had seen since entering the building, and knocked on the door. Come in. Daniel's voice made Liza's stomach flip. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into what she was certain would be her professional execution. But Daniel Blackwood Sterling wasn't what she expected. Gone was the perfectly pressed suit from the cafe. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. His usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. And most surprisingly of all, he looked tired. Genuinely tired, not just, I'm too important to sleep tired. He stood when she entered, which surprised her even more. Liza, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Always. Please sit. She chose the chair furthest from him at the massive conference table, which put about 6 feet between them. Still felt too close. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "are you planning to sue me, have me arrested, or just gloat?" "None of the above." He sat down across from her, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "I want to offer you a job." Liza blinked, then blinked again. "I'm sorry, what?" "A job. Here, working for me." "You want to hire the girl who destroyed your laptop? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" Daniel laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so different from his condescending cafe chuckle that Liza did a double take. "Possibly," he said. "But hear me out. I've been thinking about what you said at the cafe." "You mean when I called you the biggest jerk I'd ever met?" "That part, yes. But also everything else. About your background, your education, your work." He leaned forward slightly. "I did some research." "You researched me?" "Your articles for the Village Voice are impressive. Really impressive. The piece you wrote about housing inequality in Queens was nominated for a Student Journalism Award." Liza's mouth fell open. "How do you know that?" "Because I read it. Twice. And the follow-up piece about community organizing in Brooklyn. You have a gift, Liza, for finding the human story in complex issues." This was not how she'd imagined this conversation going. "Okay, so you stalked my journalism portfolio. That's creepy, but I guess flattering. What does that have to do with offering me a job?" Daniel stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. "My company is at a crossroads. We've grown fast, maybe too fast. We have all the technology, all the funding, all the business metrics. But we've lost something along the way. Your humanity?" He turned back to her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Exactly. I've built a company that's successful on paper but completely disconnected from the people it's supposed to serve. And Tuesday, when you called me out..." He paused. "No one has spoken to me like that in years. Because you surround yourself with people who are afraid to tell you the truth. Because I've become the kind of person who makes people afraid to tell me the truth." The admission hung in the air between them. Liza felt her anger beginning to shift into something else, not sympathy exactly, but curiosity. "What kind of job are you talking about?" "Head of Community Relations and Social Impact. You'd work directly with me to restructure how we engage with our customer base, particularly in underserved communities. You'd have complete editorial control over our community outreach content, and you'd help me figure out how to turn this tech startup back into something that actually helps people." Liza stared at him. "That sounds like a real job, with real responsibility." "It is. Starting salary is $75,000, full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, and a $10,000 signing bonus. The signing bonus alone would solve every financial problem she currently had." But something felt off. "Why me, Daniel? Really? There are hundreds of qualified people in this city with actual experience in corporate social responsibility." He was quiet for a long moment. "Because you were willing to destroy a $2,000 laptop to defend your principles. Because you looked me in the eye and told me exactly what you thought of me, consequences be damned. Because in 5 minutes at a coffee shop, you showed more integrity than I've seen in 5 years of boardroom meetings. And because you feel guilty about what you said." "That too." Liza stood up and joined him at the window. Manhattan sprawled out below them. Millions of people living their lives trying to make it in a city that could be both magical and merciless. "If I take this job," she said slowly, "I'm not going to become one of your yes people. If you're doing something wrong, I'm going to tell you. I'm counting on it. And I'm not going to pretend that laptop incident didn't happen. You humiliated me, Daniel. You made assumptions about me based on my job, and that's not okay. You're absolutely right. I was an ass, Liza. A complete ass. And I'm sorry." The apology was so straightforward, so lacking in corporate speak or self-justification, that it caught her off guard. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll give you an answer by Monday." "Perfect." He walked her to the door. "Liza?" Yeah? For what it's worth, throwing that laptop was probably the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. As the elevator descended back to Earth, Liza's mind was spinning. Daniel Blackwood Sterling was not the man she thought he was. The question was, who was he really? And more importantly, could she trust him enough to find out? He offered you what? Harper nearly choked on her Friday night wine, spraying Pinot Grigio across Liza's coffee table. $75,000, full benefits, and a $10,000 signing bonus to be his head of community relations. Liza handed Harper a napkin, still processing the surreal events of the past 24 hours. The same man whose laptop you turned into abstract art wants to pay you more than most people make in their first corporate job. Harper dabbed at the wine stain, shaking her head in disbelief. Liza, this sounds like the setup to either a really good romantic comedy or a really twisted revenge plot. That's what I keep thinking. Liza curled up in the corner of her couch, hugging a throw pillow. What if this is some elaborate way to humiliate me? Like he hires me just to fire me publicly or make me fail spectacularly. Or, Harper said, raising an eyebrow, what if he's genuinely attracted to a woman who had the guts to call him out? Think about it. When was the last time someone in his world told him the truth? Harper, I'm serious. You said he looked different in his office, right? Less corporate robot, more actual human being. Liza closed her eyes, remembering Daniel's expression when he'd apologized. The way his usual arrogance had been replaced by something that looked almost vulnerable. He did seem different, but that could just be good acting. Or it could be that you literally broke through his walls with a MacBook Pro. Before Liza could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Liza, it's Daniel. I know you said you'd give me an answer Monday, but I wanted you to have all the information. I'm attaching the full job description and contract terms. No pressure, just want you to make an informed decision. D. He just texted me, Liza said, staring at her phone. What did he say? He sent me the contract details and he signed it D. Ooh, personal initial. That's practically a love letter in CEO speak. Harper, I'm being serious here. This is my entire future we're talking about. Harper's expression softened. I know, hon, I'm sorry. What does your gut tell you? Liza was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through the contract Daniel had sent. The job description was detailed, comprehensive, and actually sounded meaningful. Real social impact work, not just corporate window dressing. My gut says I'm terrified, she admitted. But also, this could be exactly what I've always wanted to do. The chance to actually make a difference, not just write about other people making differences. And the fact that your future boss has killer cheekbones and looks like he stepped out of a business magazine is completely irrelevant to my decision-making process, Liza said primly, then paused. Though you're not wrong about the cheekbones. Saturday morning found Liza in the most unlikely place imaginable, volunteering at the Sunset Park Community Kitchen, ladling soup and trying to clear her head. She'd been volunteering there for 2 years, and something about the simple act of helping people always helped her think. You're distracted today, mija. Rosa, the kitchen supervisor, appeared beside her with a knowing smile. Boy troubles. Job troubles. Maybe boy troubles. Definitely life troubles. Ah, the trifecta. Rosa picked up a ladle and started serving alongside her. Want to talk about it? Liza found herself explaining the whole bizarre situation, the cafe incident, the job offer, her complete confusion about Daniel's motives. Rosa listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic sounds. So this man, Rosa said when Liza finished, he hurt your pride, then came back to make amends, and you're wondering if his apology is real? Exactly. How do I know if he's genuinely sorry or if this is some twisted power play? Mija, let me tell you something. I've been working with people for 40 years, the broken ones, the proud ones, the ones who think they're better than everyone else. And you know what I've learned? Liza shook her head. Sometimes the universe has to hit people over the head with a metaphorical laptop to wake them up. Despite everything, Liza laughed. So you think I should trust him? I think you should trust yourself. What did you see in his eyes when he apologized? Liza thought back to that moment in the conference room, the way Daniel's usual confident mask had slipped completely. Regret, real regret, and maybe loneliness. There's your answer, mija. The heart doesn't lie, even when the head is full of doubt. By Sunday evening, Liza had made her decision. She was typing her acceptance email when her phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen, and her heart did a little skip that she absolutely refused to acknowledge. Hi. Hi. His voice was softer than she remembered. I hope I'm not bothering you. I know you said Monday, but I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Actually, I was just... Before you give me your answer, he interrupted, I need to tell you something. Full disclosure. Liza's stomach dropped. Here it was, the catch she'd been waiting for. I'm listening. That day at the cafe when you threw my laptop? You weren't wrong about me. I was being an arrogant ass, and not just that day. I've been that guy for years, Liza. The guy who thinks money and success make him better than other people. Daniel. Let me finish, please. I've been thinking about what you said, about assumptions and humiliation. You want to know the real reason I offered you this job? Yes. Because in 32 years, no one has ever looked at me the way you did that day. Not impressed, not intimidated, not trying to get something from me. You looked at me like I was just a person who was being terrible and needed to be called out. Liza sank onto her couch, phone pressed to her ear. That's because that's exactly what you were. I know. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, about you, about how long it's been since someone saw me as Daniel instead of just the CEO with the bank account. There was something raw in his voice that made Liza's chest tighten. I'm offering you this job because you're brilliant and qualified and exactly what my company needs, he continued. But I'm also offering it because I hope that maybe you could help me figure out how to be the person I used to be before I became this corporate automaton. Who were you before? Liza asked quietly. Someone who wanted to change the world instead of just profiting from it. Someone who remembered that behind every business decision are actual people with actual lives. And you think I can help you find that person again? I think you already started to, the moment you told me exactly what you thought of me. Liza closed her eyes. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. This felt real in a way that corporate offers and business meetings never could. Daniel, if I take this job, things are going to be different. I meant what I said about not becoming a yes person. I'm counting on it. And we need to establish some ground rules. This is a professional relationship. Whatever else might be happening here, I need this job to work. I need to be able to support myself and finish school. Of course, completely professional. But the way he said it, like he was convincing himself as much as her, sent a shiver down Liza's spine. Okay, she said, before she could change her mind. I accept. The silence on the other end stretched so long she wondered if the call had dropped. Daniel, you there? I'm here. Thank you, Liza. You have no idea what this means to me. I hope we both don't regret this. We won't, he said. And for the first time since she'd met him, Daniel Blackwood Sterling sounded completely certain about something that didn't involve quarterly projections or market analysis. After they hung up, Liza sat in her quiet apartment and wondered what exactly she'd just gotten herself into. She was about to work for a man who'd humiliated her, charmed her, confused her, and somehow made her believe that maybe, just maybe, people really could change. Monday morning was going to be very interesting indeed. Liza stood outside the Blackwood Sterling building at 8:47 a.m. Monday morning, clutching her coffee like a lifeline and giving herself what was probably the 10th pep talk of the morning. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection in the gleaming glass doors. You're Liza Montgomery. You destroyed his laptop and lived to tell about it. You can handle one little first day at work. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt different this time. Instead of impending doom, she felt anticipation, nervousness, something that definitely wasn't just about the job despite what she'd told Harper. Miranda Chen was waiting with that same warm smile and a security badge with Liza's name already printed on it. Welcome to Blackwood Sterling, Liza. I'm so excited to have another woman on the executive team. Ready for your first day? As ready as someone can be when they're not entirely sure what they've gotten themselves into. Miranda laughed. Honest. I like that. Come on, let me show you to your office. Office. Not cubicle, not shared workspace. An actual office with a door and a window overlooking Manhattan. Liza tried not to gape as Miranda led her down the hallway, past the same intimidating photos of Daniel with important people. Here we are, Miranda said, opening a door to reveal a modern office with a glass desk, ergonomic chair, and the most beautiful view of Central Park Liza had ever seen. Daniel wanted to make sure you had everything you needed to succeed. This is incredible. Liza set her bag down on the desk, still processing that this space was actually hers. He'll want to meet with you at 10 a.m. to go over your first week's priorities. But until then, I've set up your computer with all the system access you'll need. Any questions? About 1,000, Liza thought, but she settled for, "Where's the ladies' room?" At exactly 10 a.m., Liza knocked on Daniel's office door, armed with a notepad, 3 pens, and a determination to keep things strictly professional, despite the way her pulse had quickened the moment she'd seen his name on her calendar. Come in. Daniel's office was exactly what she'd expected. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough awards to stock a trophy shop. What she hadn't expected was to find him on his hands and knees behind his desk, apparently wrestling with computer cables. Damn it, where did... Oh. He looked up as she entered, his usually perfect hair sticking up at odd angles. Liza. Hi. I'm just... He gestured helplessly at the tangle of cords. Technical difficulties. Need help? From someone who throws laptops for a living? Probably not the best idea. The joke was so unexpected and self-deprecating that Liza actually laughed. That was a one-time thing. I'm usually quite gentle with technology. In that case... He stood up, brushing dust off his pants, looking sheepish. I may have accidentally unplugged everything while trying to set up this new monitor. Liza set her notepad down and walked around to his side of the desk. The cable situation was indeed a disaster. A snake's nest of power cords, USB cables, and monitor connections that looked like someone had played a very aggressive game of technological Twister. Okay, this isn't actually that bad, she said, kneeling down to get a better look. You've got your power cord here, display cable there. How exactly did you manage to tangle everything this badly? Apparently I have a gift. Daniel knelt beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her momentarily forget what she was doing. Hand me that black cable, she said, pointing to avoid looking directly at him. Their fingers brushed as he passed her the cord, and Liza felt an electric jolt that had nothing to do with the computer setup. She focused determinedly on the task at hand, acutely aware of Daniel watching her work. There, she said, plugging in the last cable and standing up perhaps a bit too quickly. Try it now. Daniel pressed the power button and his monitor flickered to life, displaying his desktop background, a photo of what looked like a small coastal town. Where is that? Liza asked, drawn to the image despite herself. Mendocino, Northern California. My family used to rent a cabin there every summer when I was a kid. There was something wistful in his voice. Before my dad got too busy building his empire to take vacations, the glimpse into his personal life was unexpected and humanizing. Liza found herself wondering what 12-year-old Daniel had been like, running around a beach town without a care in the world. It's beautiful, she said softly. It was. Daniel cleared his throat and seemed to remember where they were. Right. Work. Your first week. They spent the next hour going over Liza's initial projects, a comprehensive review of the company's current community outreach programs or lack thereof, research into potential partnership opportunities with local nonprofits, and a proposal for how to authentically engage with underserved communities. I want your honest assessment, Daniel said, leaning back in his chair. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear. Even if it's not flattering? Especially then. Liza opened her notepad, where she'd been jotting thoughts throughout their conversation. Your current community relations strategy is basically non-existent. You donate money to a few big-name charities for tax purposes, but there's no real engagement, no understanding of what communities actually need. Daniel nodded grimly. Go on. Your marketing materials use words like authentic and community-focused, but your actual business practices don't support those claims. It's corporate speak without substance. Ouch. You asked for honest. Liza met his eyes directly. But here's the thing. It's fixable. You have the resources, the platform, and now apparently the motivation to do better. We just need to figure out what better actually looks like. And you think you can help me figure that out? I think we can figure it out together, yes. The word together hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them seemed ready to address directly. Daniel's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He glanced at it and sighed. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. Rain check on the rest of this conversation? Of course, I'll start putting together some preliminary research. Liza stood to leave, but Daniel's voice stopped her at the door. Liza? She turned back. Thank you. For the computer help, for the brutal honesty, for taking a chance on this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to throw laptops without legal consequences. Daniel laughed, that genuine laugh she was beginning to recognize. Let's try to keep future laptop interactions to a minimum. No promises, Liza said with a grin, and left him laughing. By lunchtime, Liza had already identified 3 potential nonprofit partners, drafted a preliminary assessment of the company's current community impact, spoiler alert, it was minimal, and fielded approximately 17 questions from various employees who seemed both curious about and slightly intimidated by the woman who'd tamed the boss. She was settling into her office with a sandwich when Miranda appeared in her doorway. How's the first morning going? Better than I expected, actually. Daniel's different than I thought he'd be. He is different. Since last week, I mean. Miranda stepped into the office and closed the door. Can I tell you something? I've worked for him for 3 years, and I've never seen him laugh as much as he has today. Whatever happened between you two at that coffee shop, it changed something. Liza felt her cheeks warm. We just had an honest conversation. Well, keep having them. The Daniel I used to work for never would have admitted to needing help, let alone asked someone to be brutally honest with him. Miranda paused at the door. He's a good man, Liza. He just forgot how to be one for a while. After Miranda left, Liza sat staring out her window at Central Park, thinking about summer cabins and tangled computer cables, and the way Daniel's eyes lit up when he laughed. This was supposed to be strictly professional. She was in so much trouble. 3 weeks into her new job, Liza had established what she considered a perfectly professional routine. Arrive at 8:30, productive meetings with Daniel, always with the door open. Lunch at her desk while researching nonprofit partnerships, and home by 6 p.m. sharp. No lingering, no casual conversations, and definitely no noticing how Daniel's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how he'd started bringing her coffee exactly the way she liked it every Tuesday morning. That routine went completely out the window on a Thursday night in November. Liza? Daniel's voice came through her office intercom at 7:47 p.m. Are you still here? She looked around her office, papers scattered everywhere, 3 empty coffee cups, and her laptop displaying the 15th version of the community engagement proposal that had to be perfect for tomorrow's board meeting. Unfortunately, yes, still wrestling with this presentation. Mind if I come take a look? Before she could answer, he was knocking on her door frame, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking as frazzled as she felt. You know you don't have to stay this late, right? The board meeting isn't until 2 p.m. tomorrow. I know, but... Liza gestured helplessly at her laptop screen. I can't get this right. I've written grant proposals, research papers, investigative articles, but somehow putting together a corporate presentation that doesn't sound like complete BS is beyond my capabilities. Daniel stepped closer to look at her screen, close enough that she caught that clean, expensive scent again. May I? She scooted her chair over to make room. trying to ignore how his presence seemed to fill the entire office. Okay, so what exactly are you struggling with? How do I explain to a room full of business people that authentic community engagement isn't about ROI and quarterly metrics without sounding like I'm speaking a foreign language? Daniel studied her presentation for a moment, scrolling through slides filled with her careful research and passionate arguments for why the company needed to fundamentally change its approach. "This is brilliant," he said quietly. "It's a disaster. Liza, this is exactly what they need to hear. The problem isn't your content. It's that you're trying to translate your voice into corporate speak instead of just being yourself. Myself doesn't speak boardroom. Good. Boardrooms need less corporate speak and more real talk." Daniel turned to face her, and suddenly they were much closer than strictly necessary. "Do you trust me?" "That's a loaded question. Fair point, but I have an idea. What if, instead of presenting this alone, we did it together? I'll handle the business case and you handle the heart of it. No translation required. You want to co-present? I want to show the board why I hired you, which means showing them the real Liza Montgomery, not some corporate version of her." The way he said her name made her stomach flutter in a way that was definitely not professional. "Daniel, Are you hungry?" he interrupted. "Because I just realized it's almost 8 p.m. and neither of us has eaten dinner, and I do my best strategic thinking on a full stomach. I should probably go home and there's a great Italian place 2 blocks away. My treat, and we can keep working on the presentation. Purely professional working dinner." The fact that he felt the need to specify purely professional suggested it was anything but, and they both knew it. "Okay," Liza heard herself saying. "But I'm paying for my own meal. I don't want anyone thinking I got this job because of dinner dates." "Deal. And for the record, you got this job because you have more integrity in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies." Antonio's Ristorante was exactly the kind of place Liza never would have been able to afford on her cafe salary. Intimate lighting, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of garlic and fresh basil filling the air. Daniel had apparently called ahead because they were seated immediately at a quiet corner table. "So," Liza said, spreading her presentation notes between the breadbasket and the wine glasses Daniel had ordered without asking, "Walk me through tomorrow." "What exactly am I walking into?" 12 board members, average age 62, average net worth 8 figures, and average attention span of about 6 minutes for anything that doesn't directly impact stock prices. You're really selling this? I'm preparing you. But here's the thing. They trust my judgment, even when they don't understand my decisions. And hiring you was definitely a decision they don't understand. Gee, thanks. Daniel reached across the table and touched her hand briefly. That came out wrong. What I mean is they're used to thinking of community engagement as a necessary evil, something we do for PR. You're going to show them it's actually a competitive advantage. And if they don't buy it, then we'll figure out plan B, together. There was that word again, together. Every time he said it, Liza felt something dangerous and wonderful stirring in her chest. Their food arrived, linguine alle vongole for her, ossobuco for him, and somehow between discussing presentation strategy and board politics, the conversation drifted into more personal territory. Can I ask you something? Liza said, twirling pasta around her fork. What made you want to start this company? I mean, really, not the elevator pitch version. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering. My senior year at Stanford, I had to do a project on urban food deserts. I spent weeks in East Palo Alto, interviewing families who had to take 3 buses to get to a decent grocery store. And I realized that all this technology we were developing in Silicon Valley, all these apps and platforms that were supposed to make life easier, none of it was actually helping the people who needed it most. So you wanted to change that. I wanted to build something that mattered. A platform that could connect underserved communities with resources, healthy food, local businesses, something that would actually improve people's lives instead of just entertaining them. What happened? Daniel's smile was rueful. Investors happened, market pressures, the constant push to scale fast and monetize everything. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I started this company in the first place. And you think I can help you find it again? I think you already have. That first presentation you showed me 3 weeks ago? It reminded me what I used to care about before I got caught up in quarterly earnings and market share. Liza felt her heart do something complicated. This wasn't the arrogant CEO from the cafe. This was someone who'd lost his way and was trying to find it again. Daniel, can I ask you something else? Shoot. Why were you really so awful that day at the cafe? And don't tell me it was just stress or having a bad day. I've seen you stressed and you don't turn into a complete monster. Daniel set down his fork and was quiet for so long Liza wondered if she'd overstepped. My father, he said finally. That morning, I'd had breakfast with him. He'd spent 2 hours telling me how disappointed he was in my bleeding heart tendencies, how I was too soft for business, how I needed to stop caring about people and focus on profits. So you decided to prove him wrong by being as heartless as possible? Something like that. And you were just there, in the wrong place at the wrong time, representing everything he'd told me I needed to stop caring about. That's a terrible excuse. I know. It doesn't justify anything. But it's the truth. He looked up at her, and his eyes were full of regret. I took out my frustration with him on you, and I'm sorry. More sorry than I know how to say. Your father sounds like a piece of work. He's a successful businessman who built an empire from nothing. He's also the loneliest person I know. Daniel paused. I spent so many years trying to make him proud that I forgot who I wanted to be. And who do you want to be? Someone you wouldn't feel embarrassed to work for. Someone who deserves the second chance you're giving me. The intensity in his voice made Liza's breath catch. They were definitely not in professional territory anymore. Daniel, she started, but he was already signaling for the check. We should head back and finish that presentation, he said, his business mask sliding back into place. Big day tomorrow. But as they walked back to the office building in the crisp November night, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Liza couldn't stop thinking about the vulnerability she'd seen in his eyes. The man who'd shared his dreams and disappointments over Lingual Vongole was nothing like the arrogant CEO who'd humiliated her a month ago. The question was, which Daniel was real? And more dangerously, why did she find herself hoping it was the one who looked at her like she might be worth changing for? Liza had given presentations before, to professors, to editors, even to small nonprofit boards. But standing outside the Blackwood Sterling boardroom at 1:55 p.m. on Friday, watching 12 of New York's most powerful business executives file into their seats through the glass walls, she felt like she might actually pass out. Breathe, Daniel said quietly beside her, adjusting his tie for the third time in 2 minutes. You've got this. Easy for you to say. They're not going to judge you based on whether you deserve to be here. Liza. He turned to face her fully, and she was surprised to see he looked almost as nervous as she felt. They're going to love you. How could they not? Before she could respond to the way he'd said that, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, Miranda appeared at Daniel's shoulder. They're ready for you. The boardroom was even more intimidating than Liza had imagined. 12 executives in expensive suits sat around a mahogany table that probably cost more than her entire college education, all eyes turning to watch her and Daniel enter. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel said, his voice carrying the confidence that had made him a CEO by 30, I'd like you to meet Liza Montgomery, our new head of community relations and social impact. A murmur of polite acknowledgments rippled around the table, along with a few curious glances that made Liza acutely aware she was the youngest person in the room by at least 15 years. Liza has put together a comprehensive strategy for how we can authentically engage with the communities we serve, Daniel continued, and I think you'll find her insights both challenging and essential for our long-term growth. He nodded to her, and Liza stepped forward, clicking to her first slide with hands that barely trembled. Thank you, Daniel. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge something. 4 weeks ago, I was serving coffee and couldn't afford to eat at the restaurants where your delivery platform operates. I'm not here despite that experience, I'm here because of it. The room went very quiet. Liza caught sight of a few raised eyebrows and one executive who looked like she might be suppressing a smile. Community engagement isn't about charity or good PR, Liza continued, finding her rhythm. It's about understanding that your customer base includes people you've never thought to serve. Single mothers working 2 jobs who need healthy meals delivered to food deserts, elderly customers who need technology that actually works for them, small business owners who want to participate in the gig economy but can't afford your current fee structure. She clicked to her next slide, showing demographic breakdowns and market analysis she'd spent weeks perfecting. Right now, we're leaving money on the table by ignoring underserved markets. But more importantly, we're missing the opportunity to build genuine brand loyalty by actually improving people's lives. Ms. Montgomery, interrupted Harold Whitfield, the board's most notorious skeptic. This sounds very idealistic, but what's the actual business case? How does serving unprofitable customers improve our bottom line? Liza had been waiting for this question. I'm glad you asked, Mr. Whitfield. Daniel? Daniel stepped forward smoothly. Our current customer acquisition cost in affluent markets is $47 per customer. Liza's research shows we can acquire customers in underserved markets for $12 per customer, with higher retention rates because we're solving real problems instead of just providing convenience. Additionally, Liza added, authentic community engagement drives organic growth. When you actually help people, they tell their friends. When you extract value without giving back, you create brand resentment that costs millions in marketing to overcome. She clicked to her next slide, showing comparative data from companies that had successfully implemented similar strategies. The question isn't whether we can afford to do this. The question is whether we can afford not to. What followed was the most intense 45 minutes of Liza's professional life. Questions flew from all sides about implementation costs, timeline, regulatory considerations, competitive advantages. But she was ready for all of it, and Daniel seamlessly picked up every thread she threw to him. They were a team, Liza realized with a start. Somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and Italian dinners, they'd become an actual team. One final question, said Margaret Chen, the only other woman on the board. Ms. Montgomery, you've been here less than a month. Why should we trust you to completely restructure our community engagement strategy? The room fell silent. This was the question Liza had been dreading, the one that cut right to the heart of her imposter syndrome. She looked at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod, then back at the board. Because a month ago, I was your customer. I lived in the communities you want to reach. I understand what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, to work multiple jobs just to survive, to feel invisible to companies that see you as a demographic instead of a person. Her voice grew stronger. I'm not asking you to trust me because of my credentials or my business experience. I'm asking you to trust me because I know these communities aren't just markets to be exploited. They're people with real needs and real spending power, if you can figure out how to serve them properly. And, she added with a slight smile, because I'm probably the only person in this room who's ever thrown a laptop to make a point about dignity and respect. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Harold Whitfield started laughing. I have to admit, he said, that takes guts. And frankly, we need more people around here who aren't afraid to challenge conventional thinking. Margaret Chen nodded approvingly. I move that we approve the community engagement strategy as presented, with a 6-month pilot program and quarterly reviews. Seconded, came from multiple voices around the table. The vote was unanimous. I can't believe that just happened, Liza said as they walked back to Daniel's office, her legs still slightly shaky from adrenaline. I can't believe you told them about throwing my laptop, Daniel replied, but he was grinning. It seemed relevant to establishing my credibility as someone who speaks truth to power. Well, it worked. You were incredible in there, Liza. Absolutely incredible. They stopped outside his office, and suddenly the post-presentation euphoria was replaced by something more charged. Daniel was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, but it made her heart rate spike all over again. We make a good team, he said quietly. We do. Liza, Daniel! Miranda's voice interrupted from down the hall. Your father's on line 1. Says it's urgent. The light in Daniel's eyes dimmed immediately. Of course he is. Tell him I'll call him back in. He says he's not hanging up until you take the call. Daniel's jaw tightened. Fine. I'll take it in my office. He turned back to Liza. Rain check on that conversation? Of course. But as Liza watched him walk into his office and close the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Daniel had been about to say was important, and that his father's timing was either incredibly unfortunate or incredibly deliberate. Through the glass walls of his office, she could see Daniel on the phone, his posture growing more tense with each passing minute. Whatever his father was saying, it wasn't good news. Liza tried to focus on her own work, but she kept glancing over at Daniel's office. 20 minutes into the call, she saw him run his hands through his hair in frustration. 30 minutes in, he was pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. When he finally hung up 45 minutes later, his face was stone cold. Every trace of the warm, vulnerable man from the presentation gone. He emerged from his office, grabbed his coat, and walked past her office without a word. Daniel? She called after him. He paused but didn't turn around. I have to go. Emergency family meeting. I'll see you Monday. And then he was gone, leaving Liza staring after him with a growing sense that whatever had just happened was about to change everything. Again. Monday morning arrived with an unseasonable November snowfall, and absolutely no sign of Daniel. His office remained dark, his calendar mysteriously cleared, and Miranda's usually sunny disposition was clouded with worried glances toward his empty office. Any word from him? Liza asked, trying to sound casual as she lingered by Miranda's desk for the 4th time before noon. Nothing since Friday. Just a text saying he'd be out Monday and Tuesday for family matters. Miranda lowered her voice. In 3 years, I've never known him to miss work without detailed instructions and 17 backup plans. Liza tried to focus on her work, but every instinct she'd developed as a journalist was screaming that something was very wrong. The Daniel who'd looked at her with such intensity after the presentation wouldn't just disappear without explanation, not unless something, or someone, had forced his hand. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Coffee after work? You sound stressed and I have gossip about my Tinder disaster. Can't tonight, working late. Rain check? Liza Montgomery, workaholic extraordinaire. What happened to work-life balance? What had happened was that work and life had become impossibly tangled, and now both felt like they were falling apart. Tuesday brought Daniel back, but it might as well have been a stranger wearing his face. Gone was the warm, slightly rumpled man who'd shared pasta and childhood stories. In his place was a cold, perfectly pressed executive who looked through Liza like she was furniture. Good morning, she said as he passed her office, hoping to gauge his mood. Ms. Montgomery. The formal address hit like a slap. Please schedule a meeting with me for 2 p.m. Bring your project files. Project files? Not their project files. Not the community engagement strategy they'd built together. Her project files. At exactly 2 p.m., Liza knocked on his office door, armed with her laptop and a growing sense of dread. Come in. Close the door. Daniel was standing at his window, back to her, hands clasped behind him like a general delivering bad news to his troops. Sit down, please. Liza remained standing. What's this about, Daniel? The board has had some concerns raised about the community engagement project. Concerns? They voted unanimously to approve it 3 days ago. Daniel finally turned around, and Liza's heart sank. His eyes were completely shuttered, professional mask locked firmly in place. Upon further reflection, they feel the timeline is too aggressive and the budget allocation too optimistic for current market conditions. That's corporate speak, Daniel. What really happened? I think it would be best if you focused your efforts on more traditional community relations activities, corporate sponsorships, charity partnerships, that sort of thing. Liza stared at him. You're gutting the entire program. I'm being realistic about what's feasible. No, you're being a coward. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she was too angry to care. Someone got to you. Your father, wasn't it? Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This is a business decision based on market analysis. This is bullshit, and we both know it. Liza stepped closer to his desk. 3 days ago, you were talking about authentically serving underserved communities. You were passionate about rebuilding what this company was supposed to be. What changed? I remembered that I run a business, not a charity. God, you sound exactly like him now. Like who? Your father. Is that what this is about? He didn't approve of your bleeding heart tendencies, so you're going back to being the soulless corporate drone he wants you to be? Daniel's mask slipped for just a moment, and Liza saw something that looked like pain flash across his features. But then it was gone. My personal relationship with my father has nothing to do with this business decision. Everything about this has to do with your father. The man I had dinner with last week would never gut a program he believed in just because some board members got cold feet. The man you had dinner with made a mistake. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Liza felt all the breath leave her lungs. A mistake, she repeated slowly. Getting personally involved with employees is always a mistake. It clouds judgment and creates complications. Is that what I am? A complication? Daniel looked away. I think it would be best if we maintained a strictly professional relationship going forward. Liza laughed, but there was no humor in it. Professional? Right. Like when you hired me to help you find your soul again? Or when you told me I was exactly what your company needed? That was professional? I offered you a job based on your qualifications. You offered me a job because I was the first person in years to tell you the truth about who you'd become. And now you're running away from that truth because Daddy doesn't approve. Enough. Daniel's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You have your new directives. I trust you can handle the transition to more conventional community relations work. Liza stood there for a long moment, studying this stranger wearing Daniel's face. The man who'd shared his dreams over linguine alle vongole was nowhere to be found. You know what's funny? She said finally. A month ago, I threw your laptop on the floor because I thought you were an arrogant, heartless bastard who treated people like they were disposable. And? Turns out I was right the first time. She turned toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, the man I met at that Italian restaurant, the one who wanted to build something that mattered, he was worth fighting for. Too bad he doesn't exist. Liza made it back to her office and managed to close the door before the tears started. She sat at her beautiful desk with its view of Central Park and cried for the program that would never help the communities that needed it. She cried for the partnership that had felt so right it scared her. And she cried for the man who'd looked at her like she might be worth changing for, before he decided she wasn't worth the fight. Her phone rang. Harper's name appeared on the screen. Hello? She tried to keep her voice steady. Okay, what's wrong? You sound like someone killed your dog. Worse, someone killed my project and my... whatever Daniel was. What happened? Through tears and hiccups, Liza explained the meeting, Daniel's complete personality transplant, and the gutting of everything they'd worked toward. So let me get this straight, Harper said when she finished. He basically told you that caring about you was a mistake? In so many words, yes. And you're crying in your office instead of marching back in there and giving him another piece of your mind because what's the point? He's made his choice. His father's approval matters more than anything we built together. Liza Montgomery, I have known you for 6 years, and I have never once seen you back down from a fight when something mattered to you. This is different. How? Because... Liza took a shaky breath. Because I think I might be falling in love with him. The real him. And watching him choose to be someone else instead. It hurts too much to keep fighting. The admission hung in the air, making everything feel more real and more hopeless at the same time. Oh, honey, Harper said softly. What are you going to do? Liza looked around her beautiful office, at the presentation material scattered across her desk at the window that looked out over a city full of people who needed someone to fight for them. I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm going to remember why I took this job in the first place, and I'm going to find a way to help people, even if Daniel Blackwood Sterling has decided he doesn't want to. And if he comes to his senses, then he'll have to prove he's worth the second chance I gave him. But as Liza hung up the phone and stared at Daniel's office through her glass wall, watching him pace behind his desk like the caged animal he'd become again, she couldn't help wondering if the man worth fighting for was already gone for good. 2 weeks passed in a haze of awkward elevator encounters, stilted professional emails, and Liza throwing herself into her neutered community relations work with the kind of desperate energy that comes from trying not to think about heartbreak. She organized corporate charity drives, arranged sponsorship deals with safe, established nonprofits, and smiled politely at board meetings while her soul slowly died. Daniel, meanwhile, had retreated so completely into his corporate shell that even Miranda was starting to make worried comments about his concerning dedication to quarterly projections. Everything might have continued in this miserable holding pattern indefinitely, if not for a phone call that changed everything. Liza. It was Rosa from the Sunset Park Community Kitchen, and she sounded upset. Mija, I need your help. We're about to lose the building. Liza's heart sank. What happened? The landlord jacked up our rent by 400%. Says he's got developers who want to turn this whole block into luxury condos. We have 30 days to come up with $50,000 or we're out. Rosa, I know you work for some big company now. I'm not asking for money, but do you know anyone who might want to help? We serve 200 families a week, Liza. Where are they going to go? After Rosa hung up, Liza sat staring at her computer screen, thinking about 200 families who were about to lose their lifeline, about corporate charity budgets that went to galas and golf tournaments instead of places that actually needed help, about the community engagement program that could have prevented exactly this kind of crisis. She looked across the office at Daniel's closed door, behind which he was probably analyzing market trends or optimizing profit margins, completely removed from the real world where people like Rosa were fighting to survive. Then she picked up her phone and started making calls. By Friday afternoon, Liza had organized the most guerrilla fundraising campaign of her career. She'd reached out to every nonprofit contact she'd made in her research, every journalism connection from her Village Voice days, every person she'd ever met who cared more about people than profit margins. The response was overwhelming. Small donations, big donations, offers to volunteer, local businesses pledging matching funds. By Thursday night, they'd raised $47,000, close enough that Liza was confident they could make up the difference. She was updating the fundraising spreadsheet when Daniel appeared in her doorway. She hadn't seen him this close in 2 weeks, and the sight of him made her chest tighten with a mixture of anger and longing she thought she'd gotten under control. "Working late again?" he asked, and for just a moment his voice sounded like the Daniel from the Italian restaurant. "Community relations work," she said, without looking up from her computer. "Liza, can we? If this is about the charity sponsorship recommendations I sent you, they're all pre-approved organizations with excellent financial ratings. Very safe, very traditional, exactly what you wanted." Daniel stepped into her office and closed the door. "It's not about work. Then we don't have anything to discuss. Please just give me 5 minutes." Against her better judgment, Liza looked up at him. He looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, like he hadn't been sleeping. Good, she thought vindictively, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. "You have 5 minutes." Daniel sat down across from her desk, running his hands through his hair in that gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell for when he was struggling with something. "I owe you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything. You made your position very clear." "Did I? Because I'm not sure I understand my position myself anymore." Liza leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Enlighten me." "My father, the phone call that day. He'd heard about the board meeting, about our presentation, about us." "About us?" "About how I'd been different since I hired you. People talk, Liza. Board members, investors. They'd noticed changes in how I was running the company and my priorities, and my father—" Daniel paused, struggling. "He reminded me what happened the last time I let emotions influence business decisions." Which was? 5 years ago, I tried to pivot the company toward social impact, reduced fees for small businesses, partnered with community organizations, prioritized purpose over profit. It almost destroyed us. We lost major investors, revenue dropped 40%, and I had to lay off 30 employees right before Christmas. Liza felt her anger wavering slightly. You never told me that. Because I was ashamed. Because I failed everyone who believed in me, including the communities I thought I was helping. So when your father called, he reminded me that good intentions don't pay salaries or keep companies afloat. He told me I was making the same mistakes again, and that this time I'd lose everything, including you, when the company collapsed and took your career down with it. Liza stared at him. So you decided to hurt me first. I decided to protect you from my father's prediction. If I was going to ruin your career by being selfish, I figured it was better to do it quickly, cleanly, before you got in too deep. Before I got in too deep? Liza's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Daniel, do you have any idea how patronizing that sounds? You decided what was best for me without asking what I wanted. I was trying to... You were being a coward. Liza stood up, pacing to her window. You were so afraid of failing again that you sabotaged us before we even had a chance to try. Maybe. Probably. Yes. The simple admission deflated some of her anger. And now? Now I spend every day watching you organize charity drives for organizations that don't need the money, while places like... He gestured at her computer screen, where the community kitchen fundraiser was still open. Wait, what is this? Nothing that concerns you. Daniel leaned forward, reading over the spreadsheet. Sunset Park Community Kitchen? Liza, is this what you've been working on? It's personal time. Rosa's about to lose the building because of rent increases. 200 families depend on that place. And you've raised... Daniel's eyes widened. $47,000? In 1 week? It's not enough. We're still short, and time's running out. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, studying the screen. Then he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Calling my accountant. Daniel held up a hand as Liza started to protest. $3,000 to cover the shortfall. From my personal account, not the company. No strings attached. Daniel, I can't. You're not. I am. Because you're right, Liza. I've been a coward. I let my father's fears turn me back into someone I hate, and I hurt the one person who saw something worth saving in me. Liza felt tears threatening. One grand gesture doesn't fix everything. I know. But maybe it's a start. Daniel finished his call and looked back at her. The money will be transferred tonight. Rosa won't lose her building. Why? Because 5 weeks ago, a woman threw my laptop on the floor to defend her dignity and the dignity of people like Rosa. And she was right. About me, about what I'd become, about what I could be instead. He stood up slowly. I want to be the man she thought was worth saving, even if she's decided I'm not. Liza looked at this man who'd broken her heart and put it back together in the span of 20 minutes, who'd just saved Rosa's community kitchen without being asked, who was looking at her like she held the keys to his entire future. That woman, she said carefully, might be willing to give you one more chance, if you can prove you're done letting your father make your decisions for you. What would that proof look like? Liza smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. How do you feel about reviving a certain community engagement program, with a new co-director who won't take no for an answer? I feel like it's the best idea I've heard in months. Daniel stepped closer, and suddenly they were back in that charged space where professional and personal boundaries blurred beyond recognition. Liza, about what I said before, about getting involved with employees being a mistake. Yes? I think the real mistake would be not getting involved with you. And then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and nothing about it was professional or cautious or safe. It was desperate and perfect, and exactly what both of them had been afraid to want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Liza looked up at him with sparkling eyes. For the record, she said, I never should have thrown that laptop. Daniel laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. For the record, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Really? Really. It brought me you. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Blackwood Sterling Community Impact Center in Sunset Park was everything Liza had dreamed of when she first pitched the community engagement program. Local families mingled with company executives. Rosa's famous empanadas competed with a catered spread from neighborhood restaurants, and the walls were covered with testimonials from the 17 different community programs they'd launched since January. "Not bad for a laptop-throwing waitress," Harper said, appearing at Liza's elbow with a plate of food and a grin. "Former laptop-throwing waitress," Liza corrected, watching Daniel give a speech about authentic community partnership to a crowd that actually looked engaged instead of politely bored. "Now I'm a laptop-throwing executive. Who's sleeping with her boss? Who's in love with her partner?" Liza corrected again, because that's what they were now, partners in every sense that mattered. Speaking of which, Harper nodded toward the makeshift stage where Daniel was wrapping up his remarks. "And finally," Daniel was saying, "I want to acknowledge someone without whom none of this would exist. 6 months ago, she threw my laptop on the floor of a coffee shop because I was being an arrogant ass. Today, she's revolutionizing how this company thinks about community, purpose, and what it means to do business with integrity." He looked directly at Liza, his eyes warm with love and mischief. "Liza Montgomery taught me that sometimes you have to break things, laptops, corporate structures, your own comfortable assumptions, to build something better. She also taught me that the best partnerships are built on truth, even when that truth is delivered via airborne electronics." The crowd laughed, and Liza felt her cheeks burning as everyone turned to look at her. "So here's to breaking things that need to be broken, building things that need to be built, and finding the person who makes you want to be brave enough to do both." As the crowd applauded, Daniel stepped down from the stage and made his way toward her through the celebrating crowd, his eyes never leaving her face. "Not bad for a corporate automaton," Liza said when he reached her. "I learned from the best," he replied, pulling her close. "Though next time you want to revolutionize my worldview, maybe try a strongly worded email first? Where's the fun in that?" Daniel kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, right there in front of everyone. His father's disapproval, corporate propriety, and professional boundaries be damned. "I love you, Liza Montgomery," he said against her lips. "I love you too, Daniel Blackwood Sterling, even if you do have a hyphenated last name. We could fix that, you know." Liza's heart skipped. "Are you?" "Not here," Daniel said quickly, glancing around at their very public audience. "But soon, if you'd want that." "I might," Liza said, grinning up at the man who'd gone from her worst customer to her favorite person in the span of 6 chaotic, wonderful months. "Ask me again when there's not a crowd watching." "Deal. But Liza." "Yeah?" "Thank you. For the laptop, for the second chance, for showing me who I could be. Thank you for being worth the fight." And as they stood there in the middle of Rosa's community center, surrounded by the people and programs they'd built together, Liza couldn't help thinking that sometimes the best love stories started with throwing expensive electronics on the floor. After all, some things were worth breaking for.